Hello, hello, and thanks so much for tuning in to the Scaling People podcast. I'm your host, Rasika Rajagopalan, and today I am so excited to be chatting with Marty Reaume. Marty has a really cool story serving as CPO at companies like Twilio, Fitbit, Netsuite, Sequoia. She's on multiple boards and advises for so many different companies at various stages of growth and evolution. So it's safe to say she has pretty much seen it all. Marty, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Rasika. I was looking forward to this.
I'm so excited. Well, particularly with your background, I thought we'd dig in a little bit into board membership. You've served as a CPO in many orgs, now board member. And so what was your motivation from transitioning from a four times, CPO role to focusing more on board membership and advisory roles? Do you have a specific moment or experience that sparked this shift?
Yes, I do. It's a great question. It was about 2.5 years ago, and I actually remember the moment. I was a full-time CPO, and I had two board roles on top of that, so one private, one public, and that was enough. I was, barely keeping my head above water with that, but I so enjoyed all of it. And all these other interesting companies were coming around and reaching out, and you could get, I could be an advisor for them or maybe on their board or, some sort of connection. And I just couldn't do it. There was no ways, something was going to suffer, including me. And I was so drawn, I love being a CPO, and I was so drawn to building a high performing team and then watching what we could get done together, the good, the bad, the funny, oh, that didn't work, but doing it all together. And I realized through my other two board positions, you have a team on a board. You are a team on a board. And that piece that I thought I would be missing, it's actually there. So I thought, well, I've done the CPO for a number of different technology companies, loved it all, but I was not able to take advantage of these other opportunities that were coming along. So something I had to give. And I thought I've had a long career doing this. I'd really like to learn about other companies and see how I could help them. So it was that transition moment where I could do more of the two boards that I was really, really enjoying. But I remember thinking that there will be a team. There is a team. So I didn't really feel like I gave up that part that really motivated me.
Yeah, that's so nice to hear. And I do imagine that after, a number of CPO roles, you're also looking to scale your impact in a different way and continue to learn and have a new challenge. And so I'm glad you're able to find that in some of these board positions that you've had. And so it sounds like for you, potentially, maybe you had some opportunities that had come to you. But what's your advice to CPOs that are looking to land their first board seat? How does one go about that? Are there ways you can pursue them, or do they typically come your way?
Yeah, if I'm forced to answer, do they come your way or do you pursue them? I think you can definitely do both, or both
Mhm.
happen. But I think my answer will be they tend to come to you. And I don't think that's going to be popular or motivating for people, but I think you can help that. I think you can help that along the way. And if you sort of switch the perspective around, if you're a CEO and you're building your board, what would you be looking for? Really talented people, intellectual people, people who have a good knowledge base and can help you build the business, people that you trust, people that you already know their style, so you will be an add to the board, you will be an add to the team, you're not going to be a distraction. So if you were the CEO, you're looking for those traits,
Mhm.
and you will find those traits in people that you know. So it's hard to go, I want all of those traits. Let's find the stranger that will match with that. It's just a hard thing to do. And I
Mhm.
flip it around and I think about CEOs and I sort of get it. I get why they sort of go to their network, and everybody talks about the buddies and all the buddies getting the board seats. There is a piece of me that's, if I was the CEO, I'd want somebody I could trust. I'd want somebody I know their style. I know how they work. So I think we have to think about that. There's reasonability in how you think about that. That doesn't mean the board shouldn't be diverse and they should
Mhm.
look across their network and all of those things, not the four buddies that they play cards with, right? Like they should look across their network for sure. And I think people do. But I think long before, maybe you don't know that you want a board seat later on. Maybe you're thinking about it. but long before, really start the networking. And I know that word's going to drive people crazy too because everybody uses it. And I used to go, yeah, yeah, networking. But it's the hardcore networking. It's really building those relationships with people, building the trusted relationships with people. And I think the key that differentiates people that are chosen for board positions sometimes is we all build relationships while we're working in a company,
Hmm.
but it's after that. And you leave, somebody else leaves, but keeping that relationship alive. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes time, but reaching out to somebody and asking them for help, offering them help, making introductory connections, inviting them to an industry thing that may benefit them and not really have anything to do with you. Think of them when something comes across your desk, share opportunities, just keep that community alive.
Hmm.
And then those people carry on in their worlds, right? They progress in their worlds. They may join a company looking for a board, and you're in their network. You're top of mind. You've helped them. They know
Hmm.
your style. They may carry on and become a CEO, and they're looking for a board member. You will be top of mind. You're in their network. They know how you work. So I think laying the groundwork for building that network, it starts long before. And some
Yeah.
people do it naturally. Some people have to put effort and calories into it, and it's noted. It's sort of like,
Hmm.
it's a drag, but I think those things really, really help. Now
Yeah.
you can also, of course, join communities and apply to ads, and you can also think about, well, why would you hire yourself as a board member? What's your strategic advantage? Why
Hmm.
would you hire me? Know what that is, know how to articulate it, and then it's really good work to go and find companies that need that. Are
Hmm.
there companies that are looking at geographic expansion? Have you done a lot of M&A work? And especially on, for our profession on the people side of that, integrating processes, people, culture, systems. Are there companies that are going through what you're really good at, and you can start to reach out to them and network? Maybe you know somebody in the company, and you just sort of start to work your way in there. There are ways to target companies as well, but I think my overall long answer is that positions tend to come to you through their network, and I think if we stop and slow down and think about why that is, it's trust and familiarity.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I do really love the focus on really thinking about what differentiates you and what your strategic advantage is and how you can use that to also focus some of your networking efforts. If, you've worked in a particular industry for a number of years and you feel like you really understand that business, focusing on, because sometimes I think networking can feel really overwhelming. It's like, where do I start? Which relationships do I start with? But yeah, really thinking about what your experiences have been, where you feel like you stand out, and what type of value you'd like to add. I think that can help you kind of also focus your time as you think about the businesses that you want to continue to be involved with and who that might mean you reach out to. And so, great advice. I'm curious what your experience was like as you joined your first board. Did they have an onboarding process? Did you learn as you went? I'm sure, with anything new, that a lot of people have the imposter syndrome. Like, how did you manage that first experience?
My first board was a private board, so it wasn't public. It was a new company. It was through a relationship. So one of the when I was at one of my tech companies, we were very acquisitive, bought another company. It was the CEO of one of the companies I bought, and I was on the acquisition team and I was on the integration teams, and then that little company and us, we bought another company together. So I lived with that CEO for probably 2 years nonstop. So he
Wow.
knew my style, he trusted me, knew me. He stayed for 2 years and then went off and started another company. And he came looking for me. So the company was very small, 20 people maybe.
Okay.
And so that was a little less structured. It's a private company. He knew me, and I sort of straddled between board member and CPO. They didn't have a full-blown HR department when we started. So I would help him with recruiting, I would help him with building his board. There was no onboarding. There were three investors that were on the board, and they were all physicians because it was med tech.
Mm,
And he wanted to build the other side of the board, which was sort of business focused.
mm,
So I helped him onboard two other people plus myself. So we had a board of six. So it was very shoot from the hip. It was very, how can I help you? What can we do together? What can I alleviate for you? And how do we get this going? So that it was startup-y. It
mhm,
was sort of like that. My first proper public, not that wasn't proper, but it wasn't public. My first public board was very structured. They flew me into the city for a day, and we had days full of orientation. And each department cycled through and presented where they were, their org charts, their challenges. We had a full-on day of orientation, and it was very much like programs I put together as a CPO when we were onboarding board members. And now
mm.
I'm on the other side of it. So very different experiences, but my very first one was private, and it was sort of, what can we do together?
Yeah, I love that. In that first experience, it sounds like, you were able to play a dual role where, while you were a board member, you were also able to make direct operational impact. You're supporting with recruiting and maybe some other on the ground efforts. In your public board membership, it sounds like, maybe you were maybe influencing not as directly as you were as a CPO. You're kind of influencing indirectly as you coach other executives and the CEO. And so I'm just curious how you evolved your style and adapted your, leadership to make an impact without direct control. Were there any skills you had to learn or acquire, or, a shift in your approach there?
I think that's the role of a CPO. I think we're pretty good at that. I had my team of however many, but the job is really to influence everybody else who doesn't like HR, doesn't want to do our programs, doesn't isn't interested.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Like, we have to, like, no, 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 this is good for you, and I'll show you why,
Yeah.
or tell me, like, let's develop this together if this isn't the right way. So you're influencing all the time, and I think we're unique in that. Maybe lawyers too. I think we're sort of unique in that we have to influence a lot of company, and a lot of the company, and there are many challenges and barriers to that influence. So I think we get really good at that. So that wasn't a huge transition for me onto the board. I think the human nature part of it is, when you hired me as a board member, I want to be effective. I want to jump on the board and do something, say something, have impact, ask the right questions. So I think it's sort of keeping that in check and doing it in moderation.
Hmm.
For the public board, for the first, I'm going to say, year, which is only 5 board meetings, I did a lot of listening. I did a lot of listening. I did a lot of learning. I think there is that period of time where there's a grace period where you can ask all the questions you want because you're new. Everybody
Hmm.
else knows them, but it's like, no, sure, sure. Marty's brand new. Use that time because you don't want to ask those questions 3 years into it. And it's like, why don't
Sure.
you know this? Why?
Sure.
So there's that time where you just learn about the company. You watch the style, you watch the dynamics. And then what I will bet is that there aren't too many companies that have two human capital professionals. We're trying to get companies to have one human capital professional on their board.
Hmm.
So there were obvious areas for me to just go, they don't talk about this, and maybe we should. So even though I was learning and listening, I was also able to jump in and go, hey, how do we think about this? Or I've just experienced this before a couple of times. What happens here at this company? So
Yeah.
because there was no human capital lens before, you're able
Mhm.
to do that. You're able to jump in with a lens that just wasn't on the board before.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think our entire field has continued to become more and more strategic, and they didn't necessarily have a former CPO or someone with an HR background on boards at a certain point in time, and now you're seeing that more and more, which I think is great. And so, yeah, kind of to go off of your last point, can you share an example of a time where maybe an insight you made on the people front made a significant impact, or something around talent strategy, culture came up in that setting and was able to add a lot of value to the conversation?
I think maybe two. One, I just through my career, I've been able to be a part of it. I've had the pleasure and privilege of being a part of a number of acquisitions. We were
Mm,
very, very, very acquisitive at NetSuite, and on and on and on. So we did it wrong. We stumbled, and then we got it down to like, we know how to do this. So by the time I got through this and we all just got it down to a really good science, some of those learnings I could bring to the next company. And one of them was, once you do an acquisition, there's all the people part of it, there's the systems part of it, there's the integration part of it, but there should be goals. There should be goals for the acquisition. Sort of 6 months in, what were you expecting to happen? What are we expecting to happen?
Right.
A year into the acquisition, what were we expecting to happen? What happened? So sort of asking for almost a scorecard so we can look back and go, how did we do on this acquisition? Did we call it right? Are we hitting those targets? And lots of times, my companies as well, we would do the acquisition, drive on, integrate, whatever, and look at the next acquisition. We didn't do a scorecard on the first acquisition. So I think that's important, and you learn so much from that. That was just sort of dropped on the floor if you don't go back
Mhm.
and take a look. So that was one. The other one was on the comp side. I'm the chair of the Compensation and Talent Committee. So you're forever looking at equity plans and equity vehicles and
Mhm.
how to motivate and attract talent for all the different pieces, cash and bonus and equity. And one company that I was working with had a burn rate of less than 1%. I've never had a burn rate in the single digits before. In Silicon Valley, you're hiring so many people all the time, and
Sure.
equity was top to bottom. So our burn rates were double digits. I'm ashamed to say, but used for good reason.
Mhm.
But of course, your board wants you to keep that down, and you don't want to burn through your equity plan. So we were fighting all of that. I go to this company, and it's less than 1%. And then I looked at their turnover and their promotion rates and the number of people who stayed in leadership roles, why people left leadership roles. I worked with their CPO, and I just thought we could use the equity to really lock down and engage talent
Mhm.
more than we
Mhm.
are. We're at 0.8% of our pool or something on an annual basis. So I tried this with the CEO a couple of times, and he was very much equity is for the senior talent,
Mhm.
just a
Mhm.
very different mindset.
Sure.
So I went at it a couple of times. I said, why don't we just try a program? Here, I'll give you an example of what we did in the Philippines. I'll give you an example of what we did here or there. So maybe I wore him down. I'm not really sure. But he was ready to try. So we put in a program that recognized exceptional performance and exceptional contribution and exceptional outcomes, accomplishments. And the program, I'm happy to say, is still in place. And our it's not the reason why, but our attrition rates came down. People stayed longer. Our tenure is longer. It's not just because of that, but that was a contribution. And I could tell because people wanted to be part of this program. They so wanted to earn that year. They gunned for that. And it changed how people worked. It changed the innovation in the company. They wanted to be in that chairman's choice club that got those
That's
equity
amazing.
points. And then the CEO was receiving a number of thank yous, how these equity grants changed their lives or whatever. And the CEO would pass them on to me and say, "You should be reading these."
Oh,
Which,
that's amazing.
yeah, it was a wonderful circle, but it really impacted the business. And our burn rate is still 1%.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it wasn't that out of.
Very low hanging fruit, it sounds like. Yeah. That's amazing. I think, those types of moments where you're able to help the company win and employees win, those are like the moments that we live for. So I love that example. You talked about burn rate in this example. Are there other people metrics or KPIs that you believe should be front and center in board discussions, or, certain metrics that aren't discussed often, but you think should be related to people and talent?
Yeah, there's I'm going to say all the like the easy ones, almost like attrition and engagement. We
Mhm.
all look at those, and I don't mean they're easy and you should forfeit them. I mean they're fundamental. You should
Sure.
you should of course look at those. Succession planning stats. I think that's something that every company should look at. What does your
Mhm.
succession plan look like, and what are the percentages of coverage that you have? What are the chances that we can develop somebody into those roles? What do those numbers actually look like?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I brought to the board is we need two succession plans. One is emergency. If something happens, what's our plan? Because we need to kick into it the next day. Could be
Mm-hmm.
temporary, absolutely. But in an emergency, you don't want to be scrambling around. You want to have an envelope that says, this is what we do,
Right.
because you're dealing with the emergency. And then there's a developmental succession plan where it's over time and you develop people into these stages, and how do we bridge that gap? All of that I put under something I call the health check for the organization. And we
Mm-hmm.
look at that on a regular basis. Other things like revenue for an employee, I think lots of companies look at that. Time to productivity is another one. How quickly are people hitting their stride? Does it take 3 months? Does it take 6 months? What's reasonable? When it's taking 9 months, what happened? Is this a
Mm-hmm.
fire? Is it us? Did we not train the person correctly? But all of that information really helps you turn around and look at some of your processes, and for the next batch of new hires. One thing that we looked at too was engagement per revenue. So as your engagement is going up and down, what's the effect on your revenue? Is
Mm-hmm.
there
Mm-hmm.
a correlation there?
Mm-hmm.
And then the ever-present one where you look at how you're investing in each function of the business as a percentage of your budget. So
Mm-hmm.
this year you've got 6 initiatives and they're mostly R&D, but on our budget we're spending more on G&A than we are on R&D. What's going on here? Or R&D is at 18% and G&A is at 12. Perfect. That's where we should be. But just
Yeah.
keeping an eye on those things. This is your strategy. Your budget should reflect your strategy. If your strategy is this way and your budget's that way, you better get them realigned.
Yeah, no, those are such good tips. I love engagement by revenue. I think it brings together, metrics that I think sometimes are looked at in a vacuum. Engagement's really helpful. A lot of times, engagement does drive results. Strong engagement does drive results, but not always. And so sometimes, being able to tie those two things together, paint that narrative, I think that helps you get more investment for some of the initiatives that you're working on as a team to build those numbers. I also like time to productivity. That's a really good one. So lots of really good nuggets in there. As you're joining a new board, you're working with new board members. Sometimes, they may come from different functional backgrounds, different industries. How do you approach, building relationships with them? How are board members typically evaluated? How do you know if you're being effective? All the things as it relates to, as you think about how, you're making an impact both for the company and then also within your board team group.
Yeah, there are about 9 questions in there. So
I know. Well,
I'll start.
whichever way you want to take it.
Okay, I'll take the easy one first. In terms of evaluation, on the private boards, I think you're doing a good job when you're sought after. When the CEO
Mhm.
calls you again, wants your advice. We'll say things like, "Marty, thanks so much. That was really helpful," or "That would be really really helpful. Could you talk to the head of sales?" So when they're engaging you and thanking you, that's sort of what it looks like as far as I can see from advisory boards and private boards. Once we get to the public board, and when I was on the public companies and as a CPO, we did this as well, and now as a board member, it's a formal process, and it's either through a survey that everybody fills out, and it's kind of it's anonymous, and you fill out, how's the chair of the comp committee doing, how's the chair of nom and gov, overall feedback for the board, and then it's aggregated, and either the CPO, like a me or you, would be doing it, or sometimes a third party. The other way, more recently that I've tripped into, same kind of thing, third party, but they don't send out a survey. There's a call, and so you talk through. So it's a little more engaging than sometimes getting a survey and you just sort of check it off and go on with your life. But this one I just found to be more engaging and kind of back and forth, and then that third party, which for us was a lawyer, brought it to the whole board and brought the feedback so we could all hear it. We could all hear it
Mhm.
at the same time. If there's any particular instance where a board member needs feedback in some direction, that was done privately by this third party. So the general board feedback is aggregated and brought to us. And then that's sort of the board members. The CEO participates in that, management participates in that. But then you also get feedback from the CEO. Everybody on the board has different interactions with the CEO. one of the things that I had to do, and I still do as the head of comp and talent, is I do the CEO review every year.
Mm,
So I kind of do that process. I do the interview process. I never sent out anything. I do the interview process. It's all the board members. It's the CEO. For my case, it was himself.
hmm hmm
It was the management team, and I would interview them all. And so he knew that, this is my job, and then I have to
Sure.
come back to him and go, okay, here's what it looks like. So he appreciated how I went about that. He appreciated the write up. He appreciated the very mature point of view on this. But I knew that it was helpful to him because he told me and he appreciated it. So there's
hmm
individual things like that as well. The chair of the audit committee, same kind of thing, different subject, but they have their relationship, and he gets feedback through that as well. So we all kind of get a little bit of individual, but there is a process to get
hmm hmm
to get the full board feedback.
Yeah, that's super helpful. It sounds like it's a lot of just constant communication and ongoing feedback exchange, which is great. Um,
Yeah.
so Marty, this has been amazing. You've shared so many insights around, how you navigated these initial board seats and how you continue to deliver impact. As we wrap, I'd love to get your insight into the future of board makeup. We're seeing more people leaders on boards, which is amazing. What trends do you see in board composition and expertise? Are there shifts in how companies are thinking about the ideal board makeup or trends that you're seeing in the market?
I still see the standards: CFO, CEO, go to
hmm
market talent. There's usually a legal person floating around. That's, I'd say those were the standards. What I'm seeing now is an increase in cybersecurity
mm
capability. That something a lot of boards are looking for, or have upgraded, or have added to. um, AI capabilities, both for perhaps a product that the company has, or just for your internal processes. So both lenses, and that's a hot commodity. Along with that, sort of comes with business transformation and digitalization, and integrating AI, like those skill sets.
hmm
We're looking for that right now. But then I do see the desire for talent strategy skills. So that's sort of coming to the forefront. If there's anything positive that could come out of COVID, maybe that was the positive
hmm
side. Just how rough it was for CPOs and all of their businesses, and the relationships that came out of there, and just the appreciation for CPO skills during that, I think really did help elevate our profession a little bit. And now, go to market. If you're going to market in new geographies or workforce strategies, or the ever, like, what are we doing with remote, hybrid? What are we doing with that?
Right. Right.
And that has downstream ripples. How are we paying people? Our comp programs are completely different because now everybody lives in a province or a state that we didn't expect. So there's all these downstream things that I think have really propelled our skill set. Scaling an executive team, if you're starting at a less mature company, attracting new and future skill sets. And along with that, upskilling and reskilling, and making sure that your talent is digitally aware and using AI, and
Mhm.
understanding the impacts and understanding how to integrate them into their function. So that's a whole mess of stuff that I just rattled off. But
Totally.
I think I think boards are really understanding that that is a skill set that is so additive to a board.
Absolutely. Yeah, things are changing and evolving so quickly. The gig economy, lots of companies as they're hyper scaling, the part-time employee or contractors, that affects compensation and just headcount planning. To your point, AI and the role that technology is going to play and how that requires folks, again, reskilling, or, again, like when you think about headcount planning and the needs that you have, and how you continue to meet the demands of your business. There's so much there, and it all very core to what we do and what we're thinking about. So, Marty, I really appreciate you taking time to come on the show. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and I feel like you have seen so much. So, to have you shed light on this particular area today that feels like it can be mysterious at times for people leaders is just so valuable. So, thank you again, and until next time.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. So anytime I can help, reach out.